Joe, we're back with our data on this question to do with aspirations and risk of leaving.
We are talking about departments this week, yes?
Correct. So we've basically got 3 departments. I'll put a little graph up on screen so people can see, but we basically split all the roles into 3 departments. We've got front of house, back of house, and then management. And management is sort of supervisor all the way up to senior leadership. And what we found was front of house have the highest risk of leaving, which is 1.81 out of a possible 3. Then we've got back of house, which is 1.72. And we've got management with the least risk of leaving at 1.68. So what's your initial thoughts on that?
I'm not surprised the management is the least. I suppose, as we've discussed before in other questions, if you are invested enough to stay long enough to become a manager, you're probably having a career in hospitality. So you probably want to make a bit of an impact, a bit of a difference. So that doesn't surprise me that it's low. It's actually slightly higher than I thought it would be. I thought it would actually be lower than that, to be honest. And yeah, front of house and back of house, though, I did think it would be the other way around. I hear a lot of talk, and again, it's anecdotal just from my travels. I hear a lot of talk about, the fact that chefs are the hardest to recruit for, and there's a shortage of chefs, and yeah. So I'm quite surprised that actually, people are more likely to leave if they're front of house.
Yeah, I do hear that as well. I think anecdotally that a lot of chefs have left the industry. I think more chefs have left the industry and kitchen staff than I hear of front of house leaving. Personally, that's kind of maybe why I think there's such a shortage of kitchen staff. Whereas this, I guess, is measuring. Well, that would include it, but I mean, I was wondering when I saw this about the age thing that we did last week, and I was thinking to myself, I wonder whether younger people are more likely to go into front of house roles, which maybe would link it. I mean, there's not a mega difference, to be fair, between front of house and back of house.
No. Yeah, I mean, I think, yes, I think you're right. I think probably if you're going to get an entry, if you're quite young and you're studying and you want to get a job and you're a bit personable, then probably, working behind a bar, working as working with a waiter or a waitress, that's more appealing, right? I think, than being in a kitchen. I think that kitchen is probably one still where I talk about career webs a lot, but actually in a kitchen, there is quite a hierarchy, isn't there, in the way that you progress through the kitchen. And I think when, many people, when they go to work in the kitchen, it's because they have an aspiration to do that as a job. And the reason that they leave is often, it isn't necessarily because they want to go and find another career, or it didn't used to be. But it might be that they're just not that happy in that particular kitchen, or they're not getting the development they require. But they might stay in the hospitality industry, whereas front of house, you're probably more likely to go and fulfill a career somewhere else, having worked front of house in hospitality. Most people I know, when I talk about what I do, say, oh yeah, I had a job in a bar. Oh yeah, I used to work in a hotel. Oh yeah, I served at a wedding. Not as many people, again, anecdotally, not as many people were like, yeah, I, was pastry chef, or I chopped onions when I was 18. So
more of a vocation, isn't it? I think, if you go to get a kitchen role for the first time, it's probably not a stopgap, or it's probably something that you wanted to do, or you're at least thinking it may be a career for you. Whereas, like what you said, I think actually is really valid. I think people who have just got a great personality could go into a front of house role just as a stopgap while they were doing something else.
Yeah, and I also think that there is something in a good kitchen, and this works the other way as well, but in a good kitchen, like, there's massive loyalty, isn't there, for for chef and for being in that environment and learning off people that are really, really good. And I think, when kitchens get it right, it's a super strong culture. But then on the flip side, when they get it wrong, it's really wrong. But, some of my clients, their back of house teams are so, they're so together because they just understand how each other work. They're really strong as a team, and they have their own little subculture.
Yes.
And it's quite hard to sort of break into that in some respects. And I don't know how true that is of most kitchen teams, but I suppose when we talk about it more, I'm now coming more around to the fact that, it does actually make sense, doesn't it? Yay! The data doesn't lie.
It is extremely interesting because, like we've mentioned many times with these sort of data podcasts, this is kind of version 1 of looking into this. So it's quite a high level sort of observation that we're making with all of these, and then we'll go into them all in a bit more detail later, and we'll link them all. But I think it's really interesting to just put our initial thoughts out there, because we might actually find that we were incorrect about things in a couple of months' time or 6 months. If we go back and we compare this against another piece of data, we might actually say, oh, do you know what, we thought that, but actually we were wrong.
And also that I sometimes, for our clients, I sometimes look at their data, and then that can give me a false sense of, oh, this must be true for everybody. Whereas actually this going across everybody's, all the data points it's really interesting. And it's only because of AI and because of, working with you that we've even got to this point, because we're so busy sort of developing and using our technical expertise to improve the product, that looking at the output of it is, it's fascinating. Really interesting.
Yeah. So the management, I guess maybe that's higher than you expected it to be, because that covers quite a broad description of management. So that's, I think, everything from supervisor all the way up to like a boardroom position. So we could probably break that down. And I think you would imagine sort of like supervisor and maybe like a GM level would be higher risk than somebody in the board.
I mean, they just would be. But also I think it's, in a way, if somebody, and I heard this the other day actually from somebody, where they were saying, our bad, we thought somebody was ready and we promoted them, and actually they're probably not, and now we've got to deal with it. And I think that happens more than we think it happens. I think that people are promoted into a supervisory role and then potentially up into a management role, but just haven't been given the skills to do that job, and are also expected to still do the day job as well as lead a team now. And I think that, often puts people off the role and the industry. And there's also that jump, isn't there, that I hear about from my clients, which people listening will probably know much more than me about. But there's that point where you're working sort of on an hourly rate, and then you become a manager or a supervisor and you just get more responsibility. But actually, because you go to a salary role, you can sometimes be earning less. And then it's like, well, hold on a minute, I'm not getting any development for this. I'm getting paid less than I was before. And all that's changed is my job title and the fact that, I'm getting pressure from both ways rather than before I wasn't. So, it doesn't surprise me. And it would be really interesting. I think that supervisor role, I've always said that, AGM in a multi-site organisation, AGM, or the leaders are sort of your biggest barriers or your biggest conduits. But supervisors, I think, have a lot of pressure on them, and duty managers have a lot of pressure on them that isn't always accounted for and isn't always appreciated. And they're definitely, that key role to keep our eye on. The more that technology is advancing, so everybody in the team has access to communication and what's going on in the business. It almost, in some respects, for team, for head office teams, if you like, if they're thinking, oh, well, we can just tell people directly, we don't have to rely on supervisors anymore. because they can now get communication into people's hands through various different apps. It's like, well, for that supervisor, sometimes are they getting lost? Are we paying enough attention to them? What's happening at that level? And I think people have recognised that, yeah, okay, we need to do something about leadership, but it's usually, again, at that GM or deputy GM level, not necessarily your floor, your supervisors. So I think there is something to be explored around how we're developing that level of person. I'd be really interested, as you say, to break it down further in the management levels and just see where we're at with those.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, awesome. Well, we'll leave it there for now. Jo, as always, thank you so much for your time, and I'll see you next time.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye.